Tonight we're going to be doing something very different than what we normally do. Typically, I give you a prompt that I've worked on for a little while, and the idea is, here's how you do it, and here's what I've come up with. This is the right question to ask. Tonight we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to let ChatGPT tell us what it wants to do something that's typically pretty hard, which is making subclasses. So let's go ahead and jump over. Here's where we're going to start, and it's the same place we always start, right? I am a dungeon master playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Always start with that. In this case, we're going to follow it with, I want to create a new druid subclass. What kind of information do you need from me to help create this? This is going to be cool. Watch. This came back with a lot of stuff, but as you would expect, you're creating a subclass. This is not a small endeavor. But in this case, it wants a theme or a concept. We're not going to read all these things, but I'll read the highlights. Theme or concept, so what do you want it to be about, right? Core mechanics, level breakdown, so if you want it to be different than where druids typically get their special abilities. Spellcasting, wild shape modifications, if there's a theme involved in changing or augmenting the wild shape feature, what is it? So there's a lot of little things that you might not think about, and that's where this is cool. I wouldn't have thought about some of these items here. Balancing considerations, flavor and lore, additional content, playtesting, art, and aesthetics. So playtesting is an interesting one, and it's actually the first time I've seen this come back as a item that we should think about, right? Are you open to iterating on the design based on feedback? Playtesting is essential to ensure balance and fun. So yes, obviously. I'm not going to answer all of these questions. I'm only going to answer a few of them because I don't want to help ChatGPT. I want it to be thinking free. Now, I thought about the weirdest thing that I could base a druid off of, and I came up with worms. I don't know why. Maybe I was just thinking about just druids being out in nature or something, but I was like, what's something that probably doesn't exist? Druid of the worms. So I'm going to fill in some of this detail and just see what it comes back with. This might be totally a flop, but we'll see. All right, so I really made ChatGPT's work hard for it here. I said, the theme is a druid who's really into worms. You can use, I can't wait to make some Mid-Journey art for this. You can use existing or completely new concepts. So I do want it to homebrew if it feels it needs to. Otherwise, like, there's really not going to be a whole lot going on that's going to make sense here. I want them to be utility focused. Just thinking about it, yes, there's going to be some attacks like Wormageddon, I don't know, but like they're going to probably feel a little bit more like a background character. I want them to be pretty weird, but not creepy, like they spend a lot of time alone with worms. And I want them to feel powerful because all that, and then throw a curveball into ChatGPT. I also say feel free to homebrew anything that will fit thematically. You do not need to use official content. So let's see what kind of weird subclass this creates. I just took a minute to read through this just so I would know it's not a flop, and I gotta say, I love this. It's so weird. So, blah, blah, blah. Certainly it'd be fun to explore, blah, blah, blah. Worm Whisperer is the druid subclass. Okay, let's go on. First, you have Soil Speaker at 2nd level, which it's keeping in mind what levels you're getting your special abilities at. So you gain the ability to communicate with worms, that's kind of obvious, or in similar creatures, understanding the primitive emotions and urges. When in natural soil or underground, you can use an action to sense the presence of creatures moving within a 30-foot radius. See, that's pretty cool. You get kind of like a tremor sense thing, which makes a lot of sense. No pun intended. But in this case, I like this as a starting thing. It doesn't feel too overpowered or anything like that. It feels appropriate to me. Also, obviously, very much a role play concept here, but it's 2nd level too. So next is Worm Tunneling, and this is one of my favorite abilities. You gain the ability to call forth worms and compel them to burrow tunnels for you. Over the course of 10 minutes, worms can create a tunnel 5 feet wide and up to 30 feet long. This tunnel lasts for an hour before it naturally collapses. Using it multiple times can extend the length. So I could see this being almost like we're in a dungeon and we know that there's bad guys around, but like we can hold the fort for 10 minutes while my worms dig a tunnel for us to go take a short rest in or something like that. Or just, go between a couple of different spaces. If you know that there's a chamber over there, especially as a druid, I'm thinking maybe you have mold earth and you want to just kind of, I know there's a wall, go through the dirt, kind of cut half that dungeon in half, make your DM really crazy, but you could do it. And that's a cool idea. And you get that at 2nd level. Next, Detritus Shield. As a reaction to taking damage, you can call forth worms from the ground to form a protective barrier. The shield absorbs damage equal to half your druid level. It's shield, right? But using worms. Cool. I will say, although Detritus Shield sounds cool, maybe it's great for a druid at 6th level. Feels a little bit weak for like a 6th level perk, but that's fine. Next is Worm's Wisdom. You've spent so much time with worms that you've learned their ways of staying hidden and unnoticed, so you gain advantage on stealth checks when in natural environments. Now this could be cool if you're polymorphing yourself into or just, I guess, wild shape yourself into like a cat and you're roaming around, and now you have a little extra stealth check. That's cool. Advantage on stealth checks. Additionally, over a short rest, you can consult with your worm friends, gaining cryptic insights into a problem or situation at the DM's discretion. As a DM, I would want somebody to have this, because just the challenge of trying to figure out what a worm's gonna tell a druid sounds wonderful. I love that idea. Next is Wormhole. This one's very cool. I actually love this. I wish it wasn't at 14th level, only because not everybody gets up that high, but this is cool. Once per long rest, you can use an action to summon a massive worm that burrows a temporary tunnel for you, connecting 2 points within 500 feet of each other. That length opens up so many possibilities. You can break into a castle. You can, extract some some people or something from an area. You could do a lot with a 500-foot long tunnel. The tunnel is large enough for medium-sized creatures to pass through and exists for 10 minutes before collapsing, so you do have to move, but that's okay. The worm will not attack and retreats back into the earth after creating the wormhole. So I just love the imagery of a gigantic worm just bursting out of the soil and the druid being like, all right, tunnel's all set. I think that's cool. Next, at 18th level, your bond, Earth's Embrace. Your bond with the worms grants you I just laugh thinking about this. Your bond with the worms grants you extraordinary resilience. Once per long rest, when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, you instead burrow into the ground if possible, and emerge at the start of your next turn with half your hit points. That feels powerful. Covered in a protective layer of worms that grant you resistance to all damage for 1 round. That is beefy. I like that a lot. And then it goes on to talk a little bit about some roleplay elements, which I think is cool. The druids may have spent some special moonlit rituals when they dance and sing, calling worms to the surface of a mesmerizing display. I kind of don't want to visit this druid enclave or whatever they would call themselves, but it's fun to have these stories built into your subclass. So I don't know. I think it's neat. Loners by nature, I mean, they're druids. They're going to be out in wild, so that makes sense. And then gifts from the earth. They often gift friends and allies with specially prepared worm compost, believing it to bring good luck and growth. So now this one is a utility-focused subclass, and I kind of expect it to, and I told it to be, actually. I would be interested, and I want to do something different, but I might go back just for my own interest and tell it to make a combat-based worm whisperer. But let's try something different. So this is what I want to do. I want to say, is this balanced, right? So let's do that. I asked it how I thought the Worm Whisperer would balance against other known druid subclasses. Now this is what's cool. It's going to go individually at each known, like each level and say if it's good or not. Just an example, right? So combat abilities. Its abilities are primarily utility focused. Detritus Shield offers a defensive mechanism, but overall direct combat prowess is limited versus known subclasses such as the Circle of the Moon grants druids potent combat transformations, blah, 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 blah. So in this case, it says Worm Whisperer lags in direct combat compared to several known subclasses. But utility and exploration, after talking about it for a minute, it says it's a balanced assessment. Worm Whisperer might surpass many known subclasses in terms of exploration and utility, especially in campaigns where such abilities can be frequently employed. So it's saying like this is a good one for this. Versatility though, the Worm Whisperer is less versatile than other druids subclasses due to its niche theme, which feels kind of obvious, right? Now roleplay potential, I think you could already see this is great. On par, if not richer, in terms of roleplay potential, the quirkiness of being worm-focused can lead to memorable character moments. And if it doesn't, your player is doing it wrong. Overall balance assessment, it says the Worm Whisperer is strong in utility and roleplay potential, but it may fall behind in direct combat, blah, blah, blah. It's really good for roleplay. Like, that's exactly what we designed this to be, and I think this is great. It's stupid, and I love it. So, let's go ahead and make something different, though. I'm going to try a different class. One of my favorite classes to play or to make enemies of are wizards. I just find them very obviously like D&D. Like you got your fighter and you got your wizard and you got your cleric and you got your rogue, right? So in this case, I wanted to do a wizard, and I just tried to rack my brain. What haven't I seen done before? And I picked gems. And while this was spitting it out, I went and Googled, and yes, people have made a gem-based wizard before, but I didn't see anything like this. So we're going to take a minute and go through it. So I said, I would like to create another subclass. And this is going to let ChatGPT know that all of the kind of concepts that it's already developed were good. I want to create another of what you've already done, which turned out really good. This wizard should be based around gems, and the tradition should revolve around those gems. Cool. Certainly, gems offer a dazzling array of possibilities. Like, ChatGPT, relax, go home. So let's dive into creating a gem mage. Gem mage, arcane tradition of lapidary. So cool. It's already like using cool words, right? So gem attunement, 2nd level. Upon adopting this arcane tradition, I really like this. The gem mage selects 3 gems from a predefined list: ruby, sapphire, emerald. They attune to these gems, granting unique abilities related to each. As part of this feature, they can infuse a spell into a gem once per day, releasing it as a reaction without expending a spell slot. The spell's level can't be higher than half the gem mage's level rounded down. So that's a very cool concept, and it just kind of has that built-in like ring of spell storing, except to a lesser degree, but times 3. Now, I went and I created a whole list of all of the gems that are available here, and you'll see I ended up kind of expanding this in a minute, because I wanted to kind of see what it thought each gem's theme should be, and it came up with some cool stuff. But let's keep going. So Crystal Resonance at 6th level. When the gem mage casts a spell that deals damage, they can use a gem as a focus. Depending on the gem used, the spell adds additional effects. This is kind of what I was talking about. So with Ruby, it adds fire damage equal to half the wizard's level. Sapphire slows the target's speed by half until the end of the next turn. Emerald heals the gem mage for a quarter of the damage dealt. That's pretty cool. These are just examples, and each gem could have a different effect. That's what made me think like, oh, let me find out what every gem does. Gem Shield at 10th level. One thing I have noticed making a few of these, it's not all the time, but it was frequent enough that I was a little surprised. There's often some form of shield, but this one is a little bit nicer, right? So once per long rest as a reaction, because most wizards are going to take shield anyway, right? So once per long rest as a reaction, the gem mage can summon a shimmering barrier of gem energy around them, granting temporary hit points equal to their wizard level times 5. This shield lasts for 1 minute or until depleted. For a squishy wizard, that feels really good to me. Master Lapidary, 14th level. The gem mage's mastery over gems reaches its pinnacle. Once per long rest, they can channel the energy of a gem they're attuned to, granting them a special ability for 1 minute. Ruby, you can engulf yourself in flame, causing melee attackers to take fire damage. For Sapphire, you could gain a fly speed equal to walking speed. And for Emerald, you regenerate hit points at the start of each turn. That feels really good for a 14th level, especially knowing how many choices you're going to have. I believe there's something like 15 different official gems. So very, very cool. I said, could you elaborate on this to add features for every gem in Dungeons & Dragons? Now, there's quite a few, but we're not going to read them all. However, in this case, it has gem attunement at 2nd level, and it actually changed it just a little bit to have both passive and active abilities, which I like better than the initial concept. Mostly because you want it to feel useful, right? So we'll skip Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald just because it kind of already talked about those. But let's go to, let's say, Onyx, right? So you've got your passive ability, you can see in magical darkness, and your active ability is spells you cast that deal necrotic damage siphon life, restoring hit points to you equal to half the necrotic damage dealt. Now, as a wizard, maybe you're not taking too many necrotic spells, but as a gem wizard who is looking to, attune to Onyx, maybe that's a part of your build. Maybe that's your theme. Maybe you're just maybe you're melancholy and you're just like, yeah, necrotic. Either way. So Topaz, you got resistance to lightning damage. That could be useful. Target hit by your spell is vulnerable to the next lightning damage they take before the end of your next turn. So that makes sense. I actually like that it's both you are less prone to lightning damage and they take more. So if you have some lightning spells, like, it's just cool. I think that's a good use. Pearl, you got advantage on Arcana checks. That's pretty cool. Active is the next spell you cast after using Pearl as a focus, has its spell save DC increased by 2. Okay, that's very useful. I think that's really good. Turquoise, I liked this one. You can hold your breath indefinitely, but your spells that push or pull a target increase their distance by 10 feet. I don't care about the active part, but I just think having the ability to breathe indefinitely underwater at level 2 feels really good. So going back down to the Master Lapidary, where you've got 14th level spells, or, abilities here. So channeling the energy of a gem, the previously mentioned effects for Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald remain, but others can include Diamond, making the wizard temporary ethereal, Amethyst allowing telepathy, or Onyx raising shadows to aid the wizard. So I'm sure that you could also ask ChatGPT to come up with the Master Lapidary things for each and every gem as well. I won't do that here. You could do that if you'd like to. But in this case, I think this is actually a really powerful sounding subclass, but let's see if this is good compared to some others. Same question as before, could you let me know how the Arcane Tradition of Lapidary subclass compares to other wizard subclasses? Let's see. Again, it's going to go through several different factors here. We have versatility, which it's like the gem mage is awesome, right? With the ability to attune to different gems and gain benefits, blah, 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 compared to other subclasses, which often specialize in specific areas or concepts. The Lapidary Tradition can adapt to more scenarios. So this is definitely something that's going to be a little bit more thoughtful rather than just like, I'm an evocation wizard because I just want to blow stuff up. Awesome, by the way. But in this case, this is somebody who's really thinking about their character a lot, I think. Now, power curve. It seems the Lapidary Tradition offers substantial utility from the get-go. At second level, gaining benefits from 3 gems is potentially more powerful than, say, the Divination Wizard's Portent ability, which is often cited as a high utility feature. That Portent ability basically lets you roll a couple d20s and you can replace your roll with one of those other numbers before you roll. So it is a pretty cool spell or ability. But in this case, I think this is great because you have 3 of them to choose from. By 14th level, the Gem Mage's ability to channel gem powers could potentially overshadow features like the Illusion Wizard's illusory reality, depending on the gem's effects. Situational use. While many wizard subclasses have abilities that are universally useful, the Lapidary Tradition's utility is more situational. The chosen gems will dictate the situations in which the gem mage excels, which is good, because balance is what we're going here for. It's not make me the best subclass I could possibly make. That's not what we're trying to do, right? So it's correct. It is situationally useful, but when you're in that situation, you're going to kill it. Complexity, the Gem Mage is more complex than most other wizard subclasses, which makes sense. So you got to remember your passive and active effects. All right, actually, it's funny. It points out exactly the Evocation Wizard and Transmutation. So resource management, many wizard subclasses revolve around managing specific resources. The Lapidary Tradition adds another layer of resource management with the gem attunements, which could be a pro for players. All right, so yeah, it's a little bit more complex. Flavor, we could tell this is going to be flavorful. So I like this. It's got like a few pluses, a couple of minuses. Overall, I would say this is probably feeling a little bit powerful, but my guess is that this would just be really fun to play. The fact that you don't change out your gems too is probably something that helps. And as a DM, maybe you decide to let them do it every few levels or something like that, or maybe when they get a new one of these abilities. But I feel like you just make your bet, right? Like, you're a wizard, you studied these gems, these are what you are good with. So I think I would probably say you pick them and you've got them forever. But then again, if a player's not having fun, maybe you also studied sapphires. So keep that in mind. Let's do one more though. This is really fun. And I'm just going to do another of the same. So if you kind of get the point, or if you're not that interested, then fine, but check this out. Let's do a rogue. So if you stayed around, I'm going to kind of treat you to something that I think is interesting. So rogues are, in my mind, like, they should do poison, right? Like, obviously not all of them, but I want a rogue to poison somebody. I just think that looks cool. The image of a rogue with like the dripping blades, that is something that I think of when I think of a rogue. Obviously in stealth too, but here's the problem is D&D 5e sucks when it comes to poison, right? Most things are immune or at least resistant to poison. So I changed the wording here to try to deal with that, and we'll see what it comes up with. I would like to create another subclass for a rogue. I want this subclass to focus on poisoning, but knowing that a lot of creatures are immune or resistant to poison, I want to avoid that by causing status effects with the rogue's abilities. This subclass should focus on combat. Let's see what it comes up with. This is perfect. It's kind of exactly what I was thinking of. I have no idea if this is balanced or not. That's going to be a little bit of a judgment call and probably up to the DM. It's also a little bit more for the rogue to consider on a normal attack. But let me just tell you something. I'll read the eventual one, but I want to tell you how I changed this. So the Venomblade Rogue, basically as it gets more evolved, as it levels up, it gets access to types of toxins, and it can trade one of its sneak attack dice for applying a toxin, which has a status effect, which is Pretty cool. So you're still going to do extra damage, but just a little bit less, and you're going to apply a status effect, which I love. But what I didn't love is it assigned 3 different types of toxins at 3rd level, but then it never gave you any more. And I just didn't think that felt good. I wanted to feel like I was growing or like becoming better as a toxicologist or whatever you want to call it. So what I did is I said, I like this, but I would like an additional choice for the toxic techniques that are unlocked with each new ability. It did end up giving me an additional one for 3rd, but I think 4 is too powerful. So I told it to rewrite the whole thing and give me a new ability with every ability that, like a new toxin with every ability that it gives me. So let's go over the Venomblade Rogue. So it has, at 3rd level, Toxic Techniques, which upon choosing the subclass, you've honed your skills in applying debilitating toxins to your enemies. I love that you use the word toxin so much instead of poison, because it's just avoiding the poison condition. Now, you should talk to your DM if you ever wanted to use something like this, because the whole point is to use this and just say, you know, like, monsters high up, they have immunity to poison, but I still want this character to feel good. So I'm going with toxins that apply status effects rather than just applying the poison effect, right? So in this case, this is the crunchy bit. When you hit a creature with a sneak attack, you can choose to forego the extra sneak attack damage to apply one of the following effects. The creature can make a Constitution saving throw against a DC equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier to resist the effect. Now, so I said earlier that it was just one of the sneak attack dice. I was wrong. It takes your whole sneak attack. Now, that feels a little bit worse only because it's going to reduce the amount of damage. But maybe you're not always just looking to kill stuff, or maybe you're looking to control the battlefield a little bit. You know, you got this big chunky guy and you know you can't just kill him in one hit, but you also want him to have his speed halved because you want other characters running around, or you want them to be blind so that they miss everybody because you know that they're going to last a few rounds. That gives you a lot more utility. So the numbing toxin, target speed is halved and it cannot take reactions until the end of your next turn. Blinding toxin, the target is blinded until the end of your next turn. Disorienting toxin, the target cannot take a bonus actions and has disadvantage on attack rolls until the end of your next turn. That's a pretty good one. Now, Venomous Resilience, you get this at 9th level. Your continual exposure to toxins has fortified your constitution. You gain resistance to poison, and you have advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. So that feels appropriate. Enhanced Toxins, also at 9th level, so you're getting a new toxin. Your knowledge of toxins has deepened. In addition to the toxins you already know, you can apply one of the following effects with your toxic techniques. So you have the Paralyzing Toxin, which is target's paralyzed until the end of your next turn, and then Silencing Toxin, the target cannot speak or cast spells that require verbal components until the end of your next turn. Okay, so you ended up getting 2 of them there, which is okay, maybe a little bit too much, maybe I think something might have gotten lost in translation, so use your best judgment. Debilitating Strike at 13th level. When you hit a creature with your attack, you can expend 1 of your sneak attack dice, that's where I got the idea, to roll it and subtract the number rolled from the creature's saving throw against the next toxic techniques. So not only are you going to probably get them, but you're going to make it harder for them to resist. This effect lasts until the end of your next turn. Additionally, you unlock a new toxin, Enfeebling Toxin. The target deals only half damage with weapon attacks that use strength until the end of your next turn. That feels pretty good for some of those late game monsters. Master Toxicologist. Your expertise with toxins allows you to combine their effects. When you use your toxic techniques, you can apply 2 effects at once. The creature makes a saving throw against both of them. If it succeeds, it succeeds. If it fails for both of them. Hallucinogenic Toxin is the new one you get here. The target's considered frightened and sees all creatures as enemies, potentially attacking its allies until the end of your next turn. Now, here's the thing, is like a lot of monsters might have the they can't be frightened situation, so that's going to be a judgment call. I would say that probably still applies. Like, even if you do a hallucinogenic toxin, your DM's going to be like, well, sorry, they can't be frightened. So situationally useful. Maybe don't do it on, like, I don't know, some big bad that's not you don't think would be frightened. The revised subclass maintains its Venomblades, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so I think this is a cool one, and you could certainly spend a lot of time doing this. But if you have a cool idea and you come to that situation where you're like, I need to make up a lot of abilities for this guy, and even though I have this cool concept, I don't know what's appropriate at each level, you could give it a lot more information than what I did. I actually wanted it to be just wildly throwing out all kinds of crazy stuff like the worm druid, so the worm whisperer or whatever. But if you have a good idea, give it more information and it will help you to just dial it in. You could also, like I did, say, I don't like this, rewrite it with this, and it will. Let's do the one last little thing. Let's see if this is as balanced as I think it is. I feel like this might be a little bit powerful, but let's see. So I'll make this one quicker than the other ones just because, you know, you guys have been patient. So in this case, basically combat versatility, it is not as much damage, obviously, as other ones that are going to be doing their full sneak attack damage, since that's the big piece that gives them their damage. But you do have that controlling the battlefield concept. So it says basically it's probably balanced. Direct damage versus control, again, not as much damage, doing control. Resource management, so you need to decide whether you want to do additional damage, because you can still do your sneak attack damage. You don't have to apply a toxin. So in my mind, you still have the ability to be a rogue and just do like crazy amount of damage if you feel like that's necessary, or you could do this extra little toxic thing and it could be way cooler. Utility outside of combat, there's not a whole lot of utility outside of combat here, but that's not what I asked for. I said this should be combat focused. Creature immunities, that is a big one, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, but basically you could be applying a thing that they have immunity to, and you might not know that, so it's something to keep in mind. Scaling, it does scale pretty well, I would agree with that. And then synergy with core class, basically it says, you know, you got to land your attacks to be effective, and that's kind of the deal of the rogue, or pretty much everybody who's a combat heavy class. So overall, I think this one's pretty good. And you can see how easily we took one of the harder things, in my opinion, is making a subclass, and made it way more fun, at least in my mind, using ChatGPT. I will say I don't love making subclasses, mostly because it is a ton of crunch. And in order to do it well, that is not easy. And anybody who's out there, you know, making your own homebrew subclasses, kudos to you. This is something I would likely use more for enemies, or if a player just wanted help, I could use something like this to help them along to make a cool subclass. I mean, chances are they're not going to make it up to level 17 anyway, so consider that when thinking about the subclass as a whole. But other than that, I think this is a really good way to get everything kind of moving, or at least ideate on the concepts. So, thank you all for joining me here on Dungeons & Drams. I hope you have a great rest of your night. Cheers.